Well, welcome everyone to the Sustainable Ag Speaker Series. The speaker series is co-hosted by Rural Roots and University of Idaho Extension. And so that planning committee is Suvia Judd, myself, Colette DePhelps, and my colleague, Iris Mays. So we're happy that you can join us. We have been doing the speaker series for probably 4 years now, at least. And we've been happy to be able to do it over Zoom, though we miss seeing you all in person. And we look forward to the time that we can all get together back at Hungadunga. Hungadunga has been our third partner pre-pandemic for the speaker series. So I'm going to just ask Mackenzie if she can keep track of the muting so that we are able to go through our presentations, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And at that time, you're welcome to either unmute and ask your questions directly, or at any time you can type into the chat, and you will find the chat in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. So tonight we're going to be talking about a project that University of Idaho Extension has been, and our research team have been working on for a couple of years. And it's really focused on looking at the feasibility of scaling up vegetable and fruit production on the Palouse. So our presentations tonight are going to be myself talking a little bit about the project overall and providing some background about fruit and vegetable production on the Palouse, and then specifically talking about a landowner survey and just a couple of highlights of that survey. And then I'm going to turn it over to Iris, who's going to be talking about some of the irrigation research and the systems that we're looking at as part of the project. And then over to Danny Baldwin, who is a University of Idaho graduate student who is doing on-farm research at the Soil Stewards farm, and he's going to be talking about his research project. So I wanted to start by talking about the overall research objectives that we have from this project. And one big piece of the project was to identify suitable land for small acreage farms to grow fruits and vegetables. We are, as we know, our landscape, it is a dryland agricultural landscape that is dominated by really dryland crops. So what we primarily see is wheat, rotational crops such as different kinds of legumes, peas, and garbanzo beans. Sometimes we see canola. We also see quite a bit of pasture land and some livestock production that happens as we move more towards our forested areas. So we wanted to look at this and say, do we have areas where we can grow fruits and vegetables? Where are they? And then to understand if producers and others in the region see scaling up fruit and vegetable production as something that is possible and desirable. So what are the interests, opportunities, and motivations? And then also, are there some constraints for moving forward? And one of the constraints that we were particularly interested in was thinking about water, because water is something that we talk about a lot on the Palouse. And conserving water, looking at water in terms of the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. We do have an annual summit. Those committees look primarily at water and how water is used and will be needed by the cities of Moscow and Pullman, and the universities, Washington State University and University of Idaho, but very little focus on agriculture. And so we really wanted to look at agriculture. Another driver for this project is that food and local food are really central to our communities. We have a thriving farmers market. We have many farm to table restaurants. We know that we have high interest in gardening and farm to food bank programs. So what are the real possibilities for having more of our fruits and vegetables and local food overall coming from our region's farms? And then to look at the economic impacts or the contributions and trade-offs of different strategies for scaling up production. And how do those compare to maybe some other uses of land that we might prioritize in our region? And then when we find constraints such as water scarcity, are there ways that we can overcome those constraints or look at using our water resources very carefully? And that's what Iris and Danny are going to be talking about tonight. So I wanted to say that we're showing you a snapshot tonight. However, it's really exciting that our 2020 Palouse Clearwater Food Summit is going to focus on scaling up local food production on the Palouse. And at that time, we are going to have our final project results and be presenting them both in posters and through some oral presentations and group discussions at the Food Summit. So we hope that you can join us then and get that larger picture of the possibilities and constraints of local food production on the Palouse. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the history of fruit and vegetable production in Whitman and Latah counties, and that's what we're defining as the Palouse. We know there's some bigger edges to the Palouse, but for this project, we looked at those political boundaries at the county level. And so I'm going to be showing you some information that has come from the National Ag Census. And when I present it, we have collapsed 32 individual crops into the broader categories of vegetables, small fruits like berries, and tree fruits. So again, this is census data. The census is collected approximately every 5 years. You can see that was a little bit different back from the early 1930s. But what we see is in this graph is fruit and vegetable production in Latah County starting way back in 1939. So as you can see, we had a lot of farms. So this is the number of farms producing. We had 530 farms producing tree fruits, 264 small fruits, and then 70 producing vegetables. And this is for commercial production. And then you can see that we have quite a deep decline. We do have some changes in the way the census collected data, which I'll show you in a future slide, but we had the decline nonetheless. And then when we come to our most recent census, 2017, you'll see that we actually have a small number of farms that have self-identified and completed the census as producing fruit and vegetable production. So that decline has been looking now about 18 farms at the time of the census producing vegetables for sale, 15 farms that were producing, oh, I'm sorry, I'll fix that. My tree fruits is the yellow if that got cut off anywhere else. Producing tree fruits and about 13 producing small fruits. So you can see that we historically have had an amazing amount of production. Again, here's Whitman County. So looking way back in the 1930s to the early 1950s, we saw a lot of production of tree fruit again and considerable production of small fruits and vegetables. And then again, as in Latah County, this incredible decline. A little fluctuation over the last approximately 25 years. And again, here we are with tree fruits in 2017 with 23 farms reporting they were doing tree fruits, 18 saying vegetables, and just 6 the small fruits. And then, as I said, the way the census collects data has changed over time. And so some of that flattening out could be because the census actually started collecting less information about the diversity of fruits and vegetables that they were asking early on. However, you see that this has changed, and now the census is again really looking at a diversity of crops. So we did see a marked decline right here in the 1950s when they were still collecting a lot of data about a diversity of vegetables and fruits that were being produced. So we know that it's just not a change in data collection that has resulted in this significant decline. So just to recap where we've been and where we've come in fruit and vegetable production in Whitman and Latah County. So the number of farms producing vegetables and fruits declined significantly between 1939 and 2017. And we also saw a decline in the number of acres of vegetables and fruits produced. We do not have large row crop farms in Whitman and Latah County producing fruits and vegetables. We're seeing this happen on relatively small acreages. So very different from areas like the Columbia Basin or southern Idaho, where we see larger production, or even going going over into Western Washington or Western Oregon, where we do see maybe the 10 to 50 acre, maybe 100 acre farms, those are just not the type of fruit and vegetable production farms we have here on the Palouse. So we are, though, seeing a little bit of a turnaround. I think maybe by the next census, if the number of farms that have started during the COVID-19 pandemic continue to keep operating and perhaps grow, we might see that we even have more increase in the farms that are producing fruits, vegetables, and the like. But overall, we do have a very small number of producers in Whitman and Livestock County, and that we have seen that we have had a diversity of vegetable and fruits produced in our area, which really is exciting because we know we have the capacity to do those, or to do that kind of production. So one of the questions that we had in our project was, is there land that's available that's currently in agricultural production that landowners would be interested in either leasing or selling to small farmers for fruit and vegetable production? So we conducted a landowner survey, and the research team with the data that I'm showing you is Soren Newman, who is in our Office of Grant and Project Development, myself, and Mackenzie Lawrence, who is also on the program tonight. So with the help of Felix Lau, who is on our call tonight, Felix is the principal investigator in this research project. We were able to identify a set of landowners that had a 33% probability or greater of having land suitable for fruit and vegetable production. And then using land assessor records, we found the addresses for those farms, and we sent out 581 surveys to landowners in that people who own land in Whitman and Livestock County. A number of those were undeliverable or no longer at that address. So we estimate that about 511 people received our survey, and we received 318 responses, which is a 62% response rate, which is really actually a great response rate for a mail survey. About half of the people that responded were in Livestock County and about a third in Whitman County. And so most of the people in this yellow area, 84%, actually lived on or next to the farmland that they owned. And then about 13% did not. And then about 3% said that was not applicable. And they might have been more corporations that owned that farmland, or perhaps a trust. So looking at this, the response that we got was that only 23 respondents out of 274, so that's 8%, said that they would be willing to lease to farmers for fruit and vegetable production. One of the things that we are going to do is delve into this survey more to look at why that might be. And it may be that the land is already in agricultural production or in committed lease agreements, or the landowners don't really see it as suitable for production because of restrictions with water. So there could be a lot of factors that impact that willingness, and that's something that we're going to delve into more, as I said. But that's a pretty small amount of people that were interested in providing land for lease. Of those folks that were interested in providing land, we asked about whether they were interested in fruit trees or berries or vegetables. And as you can see over here, the blue are people that are living on their property, and the green are absentee landowners. There was generally a little more interest with people that were living on or near their property in providing land for lease, but still you can see somewhat interested. We see 20% around all of these categories of fruit, trees, berries, or vegetables, but ranging from 7 to 9% of very interested. So a pretty low rate of people that were very interested. And then when we look at livestock, we asked about livestock to see if that was something people were more interested in. But overall, we actually see a little bit less interest in livestock. So the high is about 18%. Most people are interested more in cattle, and then looking at sheep, goats, and pasture poultry, there is even less interest. So what we have found is that maybe there's not a lot of land out there that is available for lease. The other question that we asked is, are people interested in selling their land? So we just had 21 people, or 7%, had some interest in selling their land to farmers to produce specifically fruits and vegetables. So what this does indicate, and we are going to look at this more, is that land access is, we know it is an issue, as small farms have told us, not only affordable land, but finding land at all that is available. But this is probably going to continue to be a challenge for new farmers in our area. And that's something that we're really going to have to put some energy in if we want to grow fruit and vegetable production on the Palouse. We also asked some questions about water, because as I said before, we wanted to know if water was a limiting factor. And so we had both our landowner survey, but then there were 20 fruit and vegetable growers in the greater region, 10 of those in Whitman and Leetah County, and others a little bit farther outside the region, that were asked what they thought about the groundwater resources. So really, we see that people do not believe that our groundwater resources are increasing. And it's interesting that about 11% of the producers thought that our groundwater was stable, but almost a quarter of landowners did. And when we look at the number of people who feel that it's declining, 67% of farmers feel that our groundwater resources are declining, and about 43% of landowners. And then we have a lot of people who don't know. And I think that this is not probably an unusual finding, that we have a lot of people that don't know. There are, our groundwater aquifers are very complex. We're learning a lot about them. A lot of research is done, but there's a lot of variability across the region. When thinking about whether or not there's going to be irrigation water accessible in 20 years, we asked landowners about that as well. And about a third of the landowners feel that there's going to be less access to irrigation water in 20 years. And about 38% said about the same. And then again, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so I think this does really reflect some of the changing management that we see with water overall in the West, and what we hear in the news about the ability of irrigation water. But again, really focusing on fruit and vegetable production in a dryland agricultural region, it's really important to understand what people know about water and to be clear about what water is available, but also then to do research on, is it sustainable, or how can we be the most efficient users of water in irrigation systems here on the Palouse for fruit and vegetable production. And this is where I'm going to turn the presentation over to Iris, because another focus of our project is really looking at water, and can we have sustainable water use in fruit and vegetable production. So Iris, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I think that would you like me to take a couple questions before that, or should we just hold those till the end?
Yeah, if people have questions about your slides, that seems fine.
Okay.
So I'll stop my share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question that they want to unmute and ask? Or if you type a question in the chat. Okay, if anything does come up, please go ahead and type into the chat and we can address those later. So Iris, when you did share, we saw your presenter view, not
okay,
the big screen.
Let me get it set up here. I thought that was excellent, Colette. A great summary of a very complicated project. So great job. So are you seeing one screen now?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see anything else besides my PowerPoint. So just so you know. So yeah, I was excited to help participate in this project when we applied for this, like Colette said, like 4 years ago. And so just a few images from the Soil Stewards farm. I picked out a few with that are showing kind of the drip tape and these very long rows of like 100 feet And so I'll show you some more images going forward of what that looks like on the end lines. I wanted to bring your attention to our irrigation workshop that's a part of this grant, part of our outreach, and that will be at the Soil Stewards Farm on June 14th. I believe the time is 1 to 3 p.m., but just make sure you watch your email in case that time changes. We'll do a tour of the farm with the irrigation system in mind, and then we'll have a couple tables of hands-on parts and demonstration, and so you can see how the whole thing's laid out. We will be following whatever the current COVID-19 restrictions are, if there are any at that time. So good idea to bring a mask if you're going to come, and we'll try to stay a little ways away. So this is just a graphic showing a typical irrigation system. You have your water source that connects through with some hookups here to a valve. You have delivery tubing and then emitters at the plant. At the Soil Stewards Farm, we have this enhanced system. This is an image of the onions last year with our intern Babita, and these, again, these long rows of drip tape. So we need consistent water pressure all down the line, so we get an even crop and even water distribution. So with the enhanced components, we have then some smart controllers. There's 3 types out at the farm that you can come see. 3, actually, I think there might be 4, but you can come look at those, and then they're hooked up to a power source. At the farm, there is no electrical power source, so we are using solar panels, and I'll show you those. We have been using a water meter to see how much water is going on. And so before, you know, how much water is being laid down onto the crops. And so before this system, there was no water meter. So this is really helping us see how much water is going on onto the ground. And then valves that kind of open and close. That's typical. And then the delivery tubing is typical. And our other added feature is the sensors and also use of weather data. Last March, right before COVID kind of shut everything down, we did have an in-person class on this at the 1912 Center with lots of heavy hitters giving overviews of irrigation. So what this looks like in a graphic, this is a very simplified graphic, but you have your water source, and then I'll show you where the controllers are on the Soil Stewards Farm, but it just gets laid out in this linear fashion. You have, you know, kind of this bigger water pipe along the rows and then getting delivered out. Now, some people will have on the end, they'll have another pipe along the end to even out that pressure so that as this water is delivered, it's evened out. But I don't think that has been used at the Soil Stewards Farm, but that's just a tip. If you are getting pressure loss at the end, you can add another pipe along there to cap it off. This is just a roll of the drip tape, and this is the kind of thing that is being used out at the Soil Stewards Farm. There's also another product called T-tape, and this just helps with that efficient delivery of consistent water. This is a graphic of what the controllers and valves usually look like. So this could be a lawn system, this could be used for a small farm, but you have a controller with electrical supply that goes through these valves that turn the water on and off. The smart technology that we have added can communicate with a computer or a smartphone, and then it also can respond to weather data or sensor input. And Tad Wheeler, who was with University of Idaho, set all this up, and I think with some of Danny's help and some other people, and then now he's at WSU, but so he has shared you know, some of his work, and I have a video link that once I stop sharing my screen, I'll put into the chat box. So you can watch his video. So he gives a walking tour. So like for the people who don't want to come to the farm, you can watch the video and get an overview video. It's about 20 minutes of the system. Okay. And just a couple more images. So you have the solar panel here, waterproof controller box. This one is the sprinkle inside here, and it has a battery pack that translates the electricity to translate that to the valves to turn them on and off, and then also collect the data as to how much water and when it's going on. And I'll show you some of those graphics. This is, now I'm into Tad's slides, and so this one is the spruce system. So that other one had that green one that was a sprinkle. And then this is the water sensor in the ground. And then you can see, you know, on the app on the phone, kind of what's going on and what has been delivered. This is a water flow meter and EveryDrop meter, and I have a few more slides on that. And so this is just the way that you can control, you can pull back water. It can be set to pull back water if there is moisture in the soil, so like rain or humidity. Okay, so some more TAD slides. So this is a summary of what was put on last summer in August with a total of 12,804 gallons. And these were on 2 beds, and these beds were, the bed 2 was like salad greens, flowers, beets, broccoli, basil, Swiss chard, parsley. And then bed 3, I think, had potatoes and pumpkins. And so this is just kind of showing how much water was calculated, counted on being laid out on those beds. So this is a really interesting slide because what you see here with the green is water that's delivered just on a schedule. So you're just telling it to open up and turn on for an hour, in the morning, an hour in the night, or something like that. But these other colors, the blue and yellow and the pink, are the ones that are responding to the weather data. So I think that shows that we, by using that weather data, we can have a better, a more efficient use of water and using less water when we don't need it. And then the pink, the non-scheduled, is like if there was manual watering. So sometimes you're observing something, and some of that times that drip tape will wiggle out of place. And so then we would augment with some hand watering if we needed to. And then this one is by zone. So the last one was by schedule, and this one is by zone. And so by collecting this data, and then hopefully this year and future years, we'll be collecting more detailed data, specifically by crop would be the goal. So we can say how much water does that need and how it's doing, and then matching that up with yield. So that's on the radar. And then this one is just showing the spruce controller feedback and decreasing, it's going to be decreasing the water delivery by 31% because the evapotranspiration has been reduced. So, or actually I had those numbers backwards, but 28% reduction in water time. So that's excellent, because that is the kind of thing that we would like all of the farmers who are watering to be able to do and have that capability. I am looking at, do I need to answer these questions, Colette? Have you read these?
No, you don't. They're a conversation about the landowner survey.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview of the flow meter. So the smart controller tells the system how long to water, but the smart flow meter says how much water did you put on. And so that's really important when we're trying to tease out, just giving just what's needed. So this is a picture here with the water meter added to the system. And then the other special thing about this is that it will shut off the system if there's a water leak, if it detects a water leak. So that's really helpful. And just some pros and cons, and this is from the EveryDrop people. They're really proud of their new Vortex technology that is affordable. And so this is a new technology that these are anywhere from around $100, and they have a high-end one that's like $200. And this is just another graphic showing that that meter can tell you what's going on if there's a valve stuck, open, closed, or what. And so these are typical failures in a sprinkler system that they addressed with their technology. There's some other inexpensive options, and I guess the spruce controller too, I should mention that those are around, I think those are around $100. And so for maybe about $400, you can get one of these kind of fancy control systems that can respond to weather data. This beehive is about $50. I think the Gardena is maybe $40. And so these are, less sophisticated, but things that you can get on Amazon if you want to start with something, but you're not ready for that whole complicated system. So the sources, Amazon, DripWorks, EveryDrop, Rainbird, and Spruce are just a few of the ones. And then I can put these links. These are a couple of sites where they reviewed some of these different controllers, so you can kind of do your own research before you purchase. And then if you are installing a new system, this is just kind of a checklist to think about. So at the Soil Stewards Farm, there was not a power source. The faucets were not in the right place. And so we did need all of that additional supplies and equipment to be able to get a more sophisticated, nuanced system. And then you want to draw your system elements on a plan, and then think about how many sensors you need, and that can cause your system to cost a little bit more because of how many sensors you may want. So and then it's always a good idea to think about soil type and how that's going to affect the flow of the water. If you have a lot of clay, that water may sit on top, so you need it to be slower delivery and that sort of thing. Okay, and then I will stop my share. And if there's any questions, I could address them. Or you can email Tad Wheeler. I'm just kidding. Or you can bring your questions to the irrigation workshop.
Yeah, thanks for that overview. That was really great, Iris.
Speed system.
Yes. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat, and we will have some time at the end so we can have a conversation and answer those questions, or perhaps there's something that Iris is going to put in the chat or be able to respond to.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the chat. So.
Great. Thanks, Iris. Okay, Danny, you're up next. We're excited to hear about your research.
Danny, I can't hear you if you're talking.
You're good now? Can everyone see that? Oh, gosh.
Yes, we're on the next step slide. So we'll go back to
Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know how that.
Well, Danny's doing that. I do just want to mention that there are a lot of student research projects at the Soil Stewards Farm. So it has been an excellent place for research and learning. So that's exciting.
There you go. Now this should look better for everybody. Okay. Can you see that now, Colette? Is that good?
Yes, that is good.
Fantastic. Alrighty. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Danny Baldwin. I am a master's student studying underneath Robert Heinz. I am interested in developing an irrigation prescription for small plot organic vegetable production on the Palouse. As Iris and Colette both mentioned, there's hardly any information out there right now pertaining to irrigation on the Palouse because we are such a dry land farming centric area, as well as there's not been very much organic fruit or vegetable production on the Palouse in the past 50 or 60 years. So part of what I'm hoping to do with my research is to develop some sort of plan for these small plot organic farms to use for irrigating that also hopefully is sustainable and will not negatively impact our local aquifers. So the Soil Stewards Farm has seen a multitude of uses over the past decades. Here I have 6 different tiles with Landsat imagery going back to 1992. And as you can see, the red boundary is the current Soil Stewards Farm extent, and those green, light green squares are the overlaid master irrigation irrigation zones that we are using at the Soil Stewards Farm. The farm has been used as primarily like a backfill dump site for the apartment complex just to the south, as well as there was a lot of wood chips that were deposited there. I guess a former use of the Soil Stewards Farm was a organic waste processing facility or storage facility. And what that means for me is that there's a lot of interesting variability within the substrate of the soil. There's an image later in the slide that will show how shallow some soil is in some places, and there's could be several inches to a foot deep of these wood chips, which can definitely cause a lot of interesting issues as far as irrigation. There also are some places on the Soil Stewards Farm that are heavily compacted, which can also interrupt proper infiltration. So the way that I'm measuring soil water uptake, or the way that the water can enter to the soil is through the use of this dual head infiltrometer, which is a technical device that will hold a constant pressure head over some water as it inserts into the soil, and will monitor the rate at which that water penetrates into the soil. And that flux is called saturated hydraulic conductivity. And it can be affected by soil texture. It can be affected by the amount of organic matter content that's in the soil. It can be affected by the porosity of the soil and the compaction, as well as any roots or worm burrows within the soil. So this slide shows 165 sites where I have collected this KFS data. I've done a full survey of the entire farm at a distribution of 10 meters between each site. Each site takes about an hour and a half to survey. So this was all last summer and part of the spring. It took me to get all these 165 sites done, because maybe sometimes the site will take multiple iterations to get a valid number for it. But I've noticed that there's been some variability, which I'll discuss later on in some of my initial findings. Most of note, though, is we have these regions along the fence line, which haven't seen a lot of use in the past 20, 30 years that the Soil Stewards farm has been utilized or for whatever land use process is going on at the time. And so those areas, as well as some of the cultivated areas in the center of zones 3 and 4, have the highest infiltration rates. Another technique that I'll be using to determine the soil use, the water uptake and movement in the soil, is through electrical conductivity mapping. And so here I have 4 tiles showing different irrigation zones at different times of the year. And you can see how there's a lot of variability within some of these irrigation zones that could be caused from different organic matter contents there, different texture, historical land uses. Maybe some of them have a lot more gravel near the surface than others. And that electrical conductivity is a good way to determine how much soil moisture is present at that site. Some observations that I've made, you can see here on the right, is probably the one that I want to hit home the most. There's only maybe 3 inches of soil there above a very thick layer of this wood chip. And that's covering about a third of the Soil Stewards farm, where I found you can dig at every KFS site or every couple KFS sites. I would dig a little 30 centimeters, so a spade depth hole, just to get a look at what the soil is under the surface. And sometimes it would be like the center top tile here, more homogeneous, looking like a Palouse silt loam. Other times it would be like this far left one, very thin compacted layer on top of what looks like an old gravel road, or it'll be like this far right one where you have a thin soil surface on top of wood chips. So my initial findings with the saturated hydraulic conductivity, as I mentioned before, you have these areas of localized high hydraulic conductivity along the fence line, as well as in the center of the irrigated zones. The average conductivity measurement that I've had is around 15 or so centimeters an hour, which is about average for a silt loam. But some of the highest values are approaching 220 centimeters per hour, which is incredibly fast. And the other places where it's highly compacted, that value is near 0. For electrical conductivity, we have found that the most variable sites are within zones 3 and 4, where this black box is, with an average electrical conductivity of 10 decisiemers per meter. And in here, we will be investigating that variability a little bit more through the use of soil moisture sensors. So the next steps that I'll be doing this upcoming summer, I'll continue to analyze the hydraulic conductivity at various sites that either had very high values or very low values, just to make sure that there wasn't any issue with the equipment at that site. I'm also going to continue to monitor this electrical conductivity throughout the growing season, hopefully once a week. And then I will identify these significant regions on the farm to further test with soil moisture monitoring and bulk density compaction and other nutrient values that are important or interesting to us. With that, I conclude my little brief description of the research I'm doing at the Soil Stewards farm. if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me now or ask Colette or Iris. And here is my contact information. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Danny. We want to go ahead and open this up for conversation and questions. And we can start if you have any questions about Danny's research. You can.
Hi,
Okay, great. Thanks, Felix. Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. I
Okay,
can.
so Daniel, very nice presentation and very interesting. I am wondering how you guys take into account kinds of different types of fruit vegetables when you're calculating those kinds of relationship between water use and soil in your research. Thank you.
Felix, if I understand correctly, the question was that how are we going to like sluice out the different vegetables within each soil, like within each bed, and like how they will affect like water uptake. And
yeah, I'm new to this area. Sorry, I'm not a soil scientist, but I'm wondering because you want to minimize the water use, right? So what type of fruit and vegetable you are testing on that farm and to better understand the relationship?
Very good question. There are a multitude of vegetables being grown there right now. Like any other garden, really, we have plenty of brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, so forth, as well as pumpkins and squash and potatoes, onions and garlic. We tried growing corn last year. Corn sometimes doesn't do exceptionally well here. We don't have entirely the heat, but we also have tomatoes and lettuce as well. Does that help answer? And so we're just kind of like broad, like whatever crops grow well, essentially, is what we're trying to really investigate. Does that help answer your question, Felix?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys also think about like the life cycle analysis? So like the whole kinds of a process, which part is using more water and which part is not using that much water? Do you see what I mean?
I think so.
From beginning to the end. So which part is using more water, you want to maybe minimize that part or something like that.
Yes, so I think maybe Iris can speak on this more perhaps. But from what I understand, what your question is asking is that we are trying to understand what parts of the Soil Stewards farm, maybe do require more water and more irrigation. However, what we have been doing so far has been working well enough to facilitate good vegetable growth. What we'd like to have more information is that's kind of one of the things that we're looking at going on a fishing trip for that data right now.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Danny, my understanding of some of those sites is that you a lot of them were not necessarily where the vegetables are being grown, right? Just right. Looking at what the soil is doing.
Yes, absolutely. I did a full survey of the entire Soil Stewards farm, and actually that's working out to my benefit because one of my other colleagues within the department, Kendall Call, is doing a cover crop rotation on 2 non-irrigated sections on the farm, and I was lucky enough to get the majority of my measurements done before they started to cultivate those regions. And so I hope to also be able to see any change as she works through her research there and kind of the land reclamation part of whatever she's looking at with the cover crops. So, but I wanted to do a full survey of the entire farm so that way I can really try to hopefully understand any trends that develop within these relatively small growth plots that we have.
So I put a question in the chat. I just was wondering if you think that there will be some results. I mean, with this combination of data of how the crops are growing, how much water is needed, and then your research, how do you think that could come together to help some of the other farmers in our area?
Well, I hope that what happens is that we're able to see, with how fast water is infiltrating based on the soil types that we have here, then they will have just more information to make an informed decision on how much water they need to apply at their own site, or what kind of testing you do before they start to implement these small plot organic agricultural techniques.
Excellent. Thanks.
Are there other questions? Okay, well, let's recap then what the next outreach that we are having coming up around this project. So Iris, can you talk again a little bit about the workshop that's coming up in June?
Yes, I can. Do you want me to show the slide again?
Sure.
Would that be helpful? And then if people want to write down, I can also, I'm going to put this into the chat while it's hard to put stuff into the chat while you're sharing your screen, I've noticed. Okay, so that'll be June 14th. And so I think that you would want to email myself or Colette to get on our list if you want to make sure you're getting the notifications for these things. And so just to show the screen again. And so can you guys see the,
yeah,
that one slide?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, sorry. There we go. So yeah, so we'll show some of the different parts and pieces that we use at the Soil Stewards farm. We'll walk around and you can see how it's going and what's growing. And then, yeah, and then, bring questions, and hopefully we'll be able to do some videotape, although it can be kind of windy out there, which makes it hard to videotape. And if you're not able to make it, we do have that video that I put into the chat of Tad giving that overview. So yeah, hope we see you in person.
Great, thank you. And then a reminder that of what I shared, that our next food summit, which is the last Friday in January 28th, 2022, is going to bring all of these different pieces of the research project together and look at not only pieces of the research project, but talk a little bit about where water and land use decisions are made and who influences those decisions. And then delving into, are there ways that we can incorporate local food production, not only into our agricultural landscape as small farms, but also are there ways to look at agricultural production in housing development, so broader land use planning? Are there ways to develop programs, more programs that are farm to food bank programs? What are the potential to look at some of the ecosystem benefits that are provided for farms, and how can we elevate some of those things like habitat and have that be part of the landscape and the conversation? So we do hope that you will join us in January when we have all of these pieces together. In the meantime, as Iris said, if you have any particular questions, you can email or give either of us a call. You can search us on the U of I website, as well as email us at our email addresses if you want to give us a call or email. So with that, thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope that you have a really great evening, and that we see you at a future speaker series event. Thanks again, everyone. Good night.